Okay, I think we can get started. My name is Josephine. I'm from ISA's virtual programming, and we are really excited for today's event. We have our guest speaker, Karen Skudlark here. She's from the University of Connecticut Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And Karen is going to be talking about, how to help participants with, learning and supporting the many needs and differences utilizing the Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, as an inclusion strategy. So we do want this to be an interactive session. So we are going to unmute all the participants, all the attendees, so that you can, participate and, are allowed to ask questions as well. Feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask a question, or you can type it into the chat or into the Q&A. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Karen.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And I understand we're people from around the world. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be. Welcome to this session. And I appreciate that you're here because you're trying to be more inclusive in your teaching with your students. And so I'm here to help you do that. What I'm going to talk about is Universal Design for Learning. And then what I'll end off on is some concrete things you can take away today. I used to work at the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning here at UConn, but I recently changed my role. I am now the IT Accessibility Coordinator, and I'm here to make sure that technology is accessible to people with disabilities. And that includes students, staff, and faculty here at the university, as well as any public-facing websites we might have. So I'm going to start, though, with Universal Design. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to talk first a little bit. We're going to do a little bit of like an exercise together. So I'm just going to pull up there we go. And so what I want to start everybody off with is I want you to think about, you're going to have a dinner for folks at your place, and you're going to buy food. And when you go buy food, what are some of the things that you will buy if you don't know who's coming to your dinner? So let's say there's about 20 people coming and you don't know who they are. What would you consider buying for your meal for folks? And try to plan for the predictable, right? Who could be coming in your door that you may not know personally, you may not know their needs. And what would you actually put on the shopping list? So feel free to put in the chat, or you can unmute your microphone and you can share that with us. But I'd like to hear some of your thoughts about what you might do with your shopping list.
Let me go first. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I think I'll probably go for salad and wraps, something more acceptable, considering the fact that some people don't eat meat and some have some dietary needs. So I'll probably go for something that is more acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhoda. I appreciate that. And it looks like Kendra wrote in the chat, no nuts, dairy, gluten, pork, or beef. So they're considering everything that you could think of. And so this is just an exercise I want you to all put together for yourselves when you teach. And when you have students come in your classroom, you don't know what their needs are. And so like you do with the shopping list, you're also preparing for students that might have other needs that you might not be aware of before they walk in the room. So when it starts with teaching and with want to be inclusive, is we have to remember that all of our learners have different needs, different skills, different talents, interests, backgrounds, and culture. Many of you from around the world, so all of you can appreciate that. And I think one of the things that we do forget sometimes to be inclusive are those with disabilities. So we're going to put a little bit of focus on disabilities today and being accessible to people with disabilities. And what I want to talk about first is just some statistics about higher ed here in the United States. Those that are 21 to 64 ages, people with a degree who do not have a disability, they're 35%. 35% of them have a degree. But those with a disability, only 15% have a degree. So does that mean that people with disabilities are less smart than people without disabilities? No, that's not necessarily the case. It's just they don't have access to get to the content. They can't get to college, they can't get to a university, or they can't access the things that are at that university. The other thing that we take it a step further, and those who are employed between the ages of 21 to 64 without a disability is 80%. But those with a disability, it's half that, which is just about 40%. So by creating a more inclusive learning environment, we're more apt to get more college graduates with people with disabilities, and therefore we'll be able to get employment for them as well. So this is one of the reasons that we want to make sure that we're more inclusive in our classrooms. One of the things I like to touch upon is the difference between what an accommodation is and what accessibility is. So in the left pane, you can see the person in the purple shirt can't see over the fence. That fence represents a barrier that we've created. So we put that up there, and it could be something in your classroom that you've created a barrier. You may not even know that you've created this barrier, but the person in the purple shirt can't participate. So what that in the second panel, this person is given a box. That's an accommodation. Now they're able to see over the barrier, right? So we've accommodated that person. But every time they want to go to this game and see a game, they have to ask for an accommodation. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could remove the barrier and get to the third panel where no one needs to ask for an accommodation? They can just participate. And that's the goal with UDLs. We want to make universal design for learning. We want to make sure everybody has access without necessarily getting an accommodation. And so this is just a caricature that talks about why are we clearing the steps for those who can walk up the steps first? Why not clear the ramp so everybody can access it? So why not make all these things accessible at the start so that everybody can access your course right away, rather than doing a little bit at a time, and then when you have time to get to the ramp, you get to the ramp. So the idea of this is clear the path so that everybody has access. One of the books that I used to help inform me on this was Reach Everyone, Teach Everyone. It's by Thomas Tobin and Kirsten Beeling. And what they talk about is UDL. It's creating interaction so people don't need to ask for special treatment, regardless of any. We want to remove barriers, and we don't want to have any, reduce the barriers that we can, but knowing that there will be times that we can't accommodate everyone all the time. But what we're trying to do is try to accommodate most of the people most of the time. So by removing the barriers that we've created, it does help others access our course. And they still may have barriers, time, connectivity, or disabilities, but because you've made it accessible, it doesn't matter. So the CAST they're the creators of UDL framework here. And what they like to frame it as is that the curriculum is disabled, not the person. So if you put the focus on the curriculum, that's the barrier. If that's what is the barrier, then you could say that that's disabled, not the person. We want to make sure that the curriculum meets the needs of our diverse students. So at a glance, universal design for learning, it needs to meet the diversity of the learners in our classrooms. So like you did for the shopping list, you want to meet the diversity of the folks that are visiting you in your dinner. You're going to make sure that the students that come to your class, that you're going to meet the needs of your diverse students. And you want to minimize barriers and maximize learning. So that's what CAST, that's what UDL is trying to achieve. And in doing so, these are the main steps that you would take. These are the checkpoints. And I'm just going to pull out my notes to make sure I cover everything. Basically, it starts with engagement, it goes to representation, and then action and expression. So with engagement is you want to make sure that the students are interested, that they're engaged in it. And if they're interested, they're going to sustain and continue to try, right? When they're not interested, they lose and they then stop trying. You also want them to self-regulate. So the whole purpose of engagement is to make sure that they're purposeful and motivated. So once you have a motivated student, then you want to make sure you give them the content they need, and that's representation. So in representation, it can be alternate ways to get content. It can also be alternate ways to show how to do something. So it's giving them different ways to interact with the content that you have for the course. And finally, the goal of that is that they're resourceful and knowledgeable. So they know where to go to get things, they have access to things, and then they will make sure that they get the knowledge that they need. And the third part for action and expression, this can be anything from helping them organize themselves. The goal is here is to be strategic and goal directed. And the executive function is really important. So that's where you can help them be organized, or you can give them alternate ways to express themselves in class. That could be, instead of doing a paper, they do a verbal presentation. It can be other ways to express themselves. It doesn't have to be the same all the time. So this is kind of UDL in a nutshell. It's everything in one place, but I'm going to take it a step further and talk about examples of each. So examples of engagement is you want to allow learners to participate in the classroom and activities that you have. Any chance you can get them to be part of the process, they're going to be more engaged. You help them set their goals and behave and have their what they want to achieve. So if you can be flexible with the grading, perhaps you give them choices on what grades they want to go for, or you could talk about different ways that they can achieve those grades. If they're part of the process, they're more likely to be more engaged. You want them to be actively participating. So as much as you can, avoid doing what I'm doing right now, which is kind of the sage on the stage, but you want to be the guide by the side, right? You want to do more active learning. You want to help them explore, experiment. So any ways you can get them to engage. You want to help them restate goals, and you want them to maybe set the goals as well. So by being really explicit about what you're trying to have the students achieve, but then they determine the way that they go about doing it. And it's really important to involve their personal experiences in all of this, because they're unique as they come into the classroom and you don't know what their experiences are. So as much as you can get to make it more personal for that individual, it gets them more engaged. And finally, as important as anything else, is making sure that they get feedback regularly. So we used to have faculty that would give a midterm and a final, and that was the grade. But now we want to make sure that we give feedback regularly. So that could be regular quizzes during the week, or you give them feedback on a paper regularly, so that they're getting the feedback throughout the semester or the term, so that they can continue to be motivated as they see what they need to work on. So those are some examples of engagement. And some examples of representation. That is where you can have alternate formats of things. If you were to tell students, if you were teaching cooking and you ask students, go bake a cake, you can give them the choice. Do they follow a recipe or do they watch a video? So the recipe is one way to learn how to bake a cake, and watching a video is another way. The other choice they might have is, do they make a square cake or do they make a round cake? So again, you're giving them the choice and you're giving them representation on how they want to be able to do that. So you're giving alternate versions of things, whether that is alternate, could be, like I said, video, it could be audio, it could be static, it could be a PDF versus a PowerPoint. So if you have a variety of ways to offer the same content to the students, it increases access, because they'll access it in the way that works best for them. And so when you have, you want to make sure that if you're teaching a STEM course, that you are always giving them the vocabulary support for that, because if the STEM course has a lot of language that they may not be familiar with, you want to make sure that that's really explicit and that they have access to that. And you always would anchor the instruction by linking it to prior knowledge. This is a lot of good pedagogy in all of this. And this is something that many people do already, but being really intentional about that and anchoring it to something that they already know. And it's always important to connect things between courses, whether it's a course they took in the past or it's a related course. You always want to try to find those connections. And then scaffolding is an important aspect of it. So you want to be able to scaffold it at the level that they need, and they'll begin to be more successful. Some examples of action and expression is, like I said before, is helping them be more organized with their executive functioning. So you can give them graphic organizers. You can also give them options on how fast they need to finish something. So if you give them more time on an exam, or you give them a little bit more time on completing a paper, you can have them solve problems in a variety of different ways. So if somebody's baking a cake, like I said, they can use a square pan or a round pan. It doesn't matter which one they use. The goal is that they're able to bake a cake. And then you also want to give examples of what works. So if you can give examples of what process works and some goal setting for them, it does help with them being able to complete the work and be successful. So what I want to do is go into a little more detail on what you can do today. But before I do that, Are there any questions about UDL and using it? I realize I don't have the chat up, so I don't know if anybody's got the chat. Any questions?
I see that Bertha has her hand raised. Bertha, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question.
Okay, thank you.
No, my question was for the previous
Yes.
to this particular topic of whether we've used UDL, but I'll just quickly say that I've not used the UDL as you're describing it now in that terminology. I just do know that we had to work with the Office of Disability. And so what I did is I did on my first day of class, I distributed a one-page question, kind of survey to find out what the needs of the student were, their learning needs. Do you have, and one of the questions was, do you have a disability or anything that stops you from enjoying the full learning experience? And that's how I got to know who was affected. But we had to learn with we had to work with the Office of Disability. My question had to do with building. I know you'll address this, but building. How do you build this in the syllabus? How do you build all this variety of strategies in the syllabus? That was just my question.
Yep. So can you give me a little example of the syllabus? Are you talking about the content in the syllabus? Or are you talking about the structure of the syllabus, or a little bit of both?
I think for me, it's how does my syllabus, where I am is how does my syllabus evidence or show that I am attending to a variety of strategies. Specifically, I think where people look at is much more closely is the assignments. I was wondering, is this where it really should come out so that the students see themselves or see they have full access and don't feel like, oh, this doesn't, I'm going to have a problem. I have to talk to the professor,
Right.
I'm just wondering, that's just where I am. What is it, all the sections, or does it come out more in the assignments, requirements of the students?
I see it in all aspects of it, starting with the engagement and then the content, and then in the assignments. So I think it's important that you do start to at least with a variety of assignments. If there are ways for students to personalize the assignment to make it more meaningful to them, you can do that. What is it that you teach? What content?
I'm in the social sciences, so conflict resolution.
Conflict resolution. Okay.
Science, international relations, security, and peace.
Yep. Okay.
So I do use a lot of, I built in a lot of videos, group work, where I spent time selecting videos that the students can use to understand basic concepts, even more complex concepts. And I used to assign those videos to sometimes group works, or sometimes I would give them a problem, a real life problem posed by perhaps a non-governmental organization or the UN, described somewhere, and then ask them over the course of the semester to work on finding a solution using what they have learned. But I also did realize that there are people who have different levels, different abilities, and that was my challenge. If somebody hard of hearing, how do they work in group work? If somebody is blind, how does that work? How do I also engage students? Because you see, we go into these things because that's what we usually do, but when it comes to the dynamics of interaction and all, that's where all these things show up.
Yeah. One of the things that we like I had to do with your dinner party that you had. You thought about all the different allergies people could have, or religious restrictions they might have. You think about that when you have a dinner party. When it comes to our learners, you want to think about students who can't see, students who can't hear. Color contrast can be difficult for students, right? And then you have students with mobility issues. They might not be able to use a mouse. They might not be able to use a keyboard, right? Or there might be students that can't talk for a variety of reasons. So you want to think about the types of students that could come into your classroom. And as you try to accommodate them, I think what happens is this awareness starts to happen. For instance, we were working with faculty that they teach, it's a fine arts, and it's all about the drawings and images, and it's to analyze those images. That's what the course is about. And we suggested to them that it's possible you might get a student that's blind. How would you handle that in this class? Because it's very visual. And there was a lot of pushback from the faculty saying, well, they shouldn't be in my class. But should we, that in their mind, you need to be able to see to be able to participate. And once we started working through what we call alt text and how to describe an image, and she started to do that with all of the images in her class, it first was an aha moment for her to realize you don't need to have eyes to be able to experience a picture, a drawing or a painting. You can hear about that picture if it's described well. And what it did is it forced her to really focus on what is important about this picture. So what I'm thinking is, as you start doing this, you're going to see, most important thing is start with small pieces. Don't start changing the entire course all at once.
Okay.
With UDL, they have a couple ways to go about it. It's in the book that I expressed. It sounds like Erica, you might have read the book, so that's great. There's a 20-minute UDL, there's a 20-day UDL, and then a 20-month, I think it's a UDL. So essentially what it is what can you do in 20 minutes that will change something in your course? So you're taking bite-sized things. So maybe you start with the assignments, because it sounds like that's something you're interested in doing.
Yes.
Right, so you start with that, and then you have the 20-day UDL would force you to go through the content in your course to make sure you have alternate versions of it. So for instance, if you have a PowerPoint, do you have it in also a PDF format? And do you also have it in maybe a short video format? So you can take a PowerPoint and you can record a short video with that PowerPoint. So now you've offered it in 3 different ways that it can be consumed. And we think about the students that can't hear and can't see. So when you create a video, for instance, you're going to have captions, which I'll talk about in a little while. So you're going to have captions for it. But sometimes what we forget is that there are students that can't see or can't see well. And you're expecting them to be able to see your screen. So when you start teaching when you create video, one thing to think about is being descriptive and what is on the screen. So instead of saying click here, you would say click on on whatever the image is, for instance. And you might describe what's on the screen rather than just expecting people to be able to see it. It does take time for that process to happen. With captions, it's pretty easy. We have artificial intelligence, some AI can put captions on our videos for us. We can go in and fix them. And it's pretty clear for us what we need to do for captions. But when it comes to visual learners or students with disabilities with vision, it's really hard sometimes to, when you can see, you take for granted what you're able to learn from what's on the screen. So you really need to be intentional about the people that can't see or can't see well. So I would focus on your assignments. And like I always say, the syllabus is probably the first thing you want to make sure is accessible. And what I'll do is I can show you all a sample of a syllabus that I put together for a class I taught. And I can show you the difference between what one looks like and what another looks like. And I think it just start small pieces as much as you can. Don't do everything at once. So that 20-minute thing, do your syllabus, do one assignment, like the 20 minutes, take it and do one thing. And then the 20-day, that's where you methodically go through your course and make sure that you have alternate versions of all the content you have. And then the 20-month, that's more of a developing a course, right? So you're going to teach the course one semester, get some like what worked, what didn't work, and then incorporate what you learned from that. So it's a work in progress for sure. It's nothing that you're going to get right away, but you always keep going, like a little bit at a time, They have another phrase that they use, which is +1. Just add one more way to do that. You don't have to do it for everything, but just do one more way to do that assignment. or one more way to access your syllabus, or just one more way to get that content that you're trying to share with them. So they call it the +1. You just get one more way.
You know, Karen, I just got, as you were speaking, I just wondered, based on what you said, one thing I could do with a syllabus to make it accessible to all is, could I do a short, either video or audio, just describing the syllabus for those who read the paper copy, because I don't have that all material for the braille and whatever it is, but
yeah. So
and then let the student know. I mean, could I like do a brief kind of walking through, reading through, or walking through to let them know what the important aspects of the content is?
Exactly. And then the one thing they're getting from this is a connection with the student too, right? So you're now connecting with the student in a way that you weren't before. They're hearing your voice and they're getting to know you a little bit better. So when they walk in the classroom, they already know you a little bit, right? So there's a lot of other advantages to that as well. But remember, there are students that have time constraints, right? So students may not be able, so they can listen to your video or your audio on the drive to work or on the train when they're going to school. So by offering it in alternate formats, it definitely can help them with the, So I hope that's helped. That was a little bit longer.
Yes, a lot. Thank you.
Does anybody else have questions like that? Or, I mean, I'm happy to talk about UDL and what you could do in your course. Well, my plan right now is to shift a little bit to like what you can physically like do for concretely do now. And then we can talk more about the nuances of your courses perhaps, and maybe what you can do with it. So if that's all right with everybody, I'm going to keep moving on. And I'm going to keep the chat minimized because it's kind of in the way of what I've got. So if anybody has a question, feel free to just unmute and ask a question. So what can you do today? And that is, you can make sure that you have captions for your videos that I talked about. You can make sure that your documents are accessible, especially for screen readers. So screen readers are used by people who have low vision or are blind, but a lot of people are using screen readers more and more for cognitive disabilities, if they have dyslexia, or they have some other disability, or people just can't, don't have time to read the document. Like I said, if they're driving to work or on the train and they want to be able to hear it, they can hear the content as well. So using a screen reader can be very helpful for some people. And as I said, start with your syllabus. And I will show you now some of the things you can do. We'll start with the captions. So the captions are important that they're accurate. And what I use is called the Described in Media Captioning Program, the DCMP. And what that is in the US, it's a program that is federally funded. And I think it's also, I think the Institute for the Blind, I think, work on it as well. But essentially it's to support students in academic settings and people who are blind, visually impaired, deaf, or hard of hearing. And they do a lot of research about what works and doesn't work. And they have this captioning key that talks a lot about what is good captioning, what's best practice. So by using them as a resource, you can find out how to make sure that your captions are accessible. And the elements of quality caption include the following: that they're accurate, right? So I don't really need to say this for all of you, but it's one of the things that we sometimes overlook. We have the artificial intelligence, right? AI is creating our captions, whether you upload them to YouTube or some other similar platform. And captions might get generated, but they're about 80 to 90% accurate. It will depend on the content, if there's a person that's speaking has an accent or not. And so you want to make sure that they're accurate. Here at UConn, at the University of Connecticut, we call it UConn. And it's spelled UCONN. But if we were to put that through captions, it would be spelled YUKON, which is actually a potato or a place in Canada. So we don't want people to be mistaken what UConn is. We want to make sure they know that UConn is the University of Connecticut. So that is one of the easy examples of what needs to be accurate. But also whenever you have a STEM course, there's going to be many words in there that are pretty complicated and the AI probably won't get it right. So you want to make sure that when somebody sees those captions, they're getting the right information. Because especially when they're trying to learn something for the first time, you want to make sure it's right. The other thing is consistent. So when it comes to captions, our chemistry department wanted to proactively caption the videos for their students in their intro to chemistry course. And in doing so, they have a formula that they use often, and they have a few formulas, and they asked me, how do I caption this? Because it's got words, it's got letters. I mean, it's got, letters, and it's got numbers, and they weren't sure how to caption it. I reached out to the DCMP and asked them, what's best practice when it comes to chemistry? And they said they don't know, because they don't have enough research on it yet. So what that means is that there's still we still have to learn what's best practice in certain fields. But what's important is that you're consistent. So when they decided how they were going to caption their formulas, they were consistent in doing that throughout. So whenever you caption, you want to make sure that you're consistent. They need to be clear. YouTube tends to put the captions over content. So if you're going to use YouTube as your platform, you'll want to make sure if you're using a PowerPoint or something like that, that at the very bottom of the screen, there's a blank spot so that the captions don't cover anything up. There are some platforms where you can control where the captions go, but in YouTube, we don't have that control, so they do cover content, so keep that in mind. Readable, they need to be able to be on the screen long enough. Usually when you do the automatic captions, they're already going to be synced up and everything, so you don't have to really worry about that as much. And equal. So what that means is anything that the hearing person experiences, the deaf person should also experience. So if a car door slams, you want to put that in there. If the person repeats themselves or even gives the wrong information, that should be in the captions. I've had people ask, I said blue in my video, but I meant to say red. Can I change that in the caption so that they're right? And the answer is no. You put in there whatever you said was wrong, the captions should be wrong too, if that makes sense. Because you're not there to decide what the deaf person experiences. You're there to give them equal access. Whatever the hearing person experiences, the deaf person experiences. If you did make a mistake in your video, you can visually put something there that says, I should have said red instead of blue, or something like that. But when it comes to the captions, you don't have that, really have that option. So that's all what quality captioning is about. And you can use YouTube to edit the captions after they're up there. So that's captioning. And we're going to move to the next, which is documents. But before I go, does anybody have any questions about captioning? Feel free to raise your hand or anything like that. Okay, I'm going to keep on going. So the next thing I like to show is if you create a document and you don't use proper structure, the document could be inaccessible to someone. And what I like to do is I like to show this picture of an inaccessible document. And when you see this document, you can't read this, obviously, it's too tiny, but you get the sense of if you were given this document, it's a very dense document. There's no organization to it. So with somebody with a screen reader, this is kind of what it could feel like. If I wanted to find content in this, I would have to almost read the entire thing to get what I wanted. I can't skim the headers or footers or the sections. I couldn't do any of that. And so what we want to do is make sure that our documents are accessible. And what an accessible document looks like is like this. So this is the same exact document, but it's using the structure that we would expect. Visually, we can then pick the section we want to go to. So I could jump right down to general considerations at the bottom there. But what this does by having the proper structure, not only does it help people that can see, but those with a screen reader, they can then navigate through this document. They don't need to read it from the beginning to the end to get the content they need. If a person wanted to go to the general considerations, they can just tab down there and go right to that section. So by creating the structure, the screen reader can help them navigate the document a lot easier, and it makes it more accessible. So how do we do that? And that's what I'm going to go into in a little while. But essentially, this little arrow shows you this. There's a little tiny caret, right? Oh, you can't see it up here. Hold on. There's a little tiny caret right there. And what that is that's showing us that there's a header right there. And then down below that, you can see that there's little carets here. This is Microsoft Word. And these little sections are all in there. So this is what an accessible Word document would look like. So what does it mean to make an accessible document? So by using screen readers, people are using them and they need to be able to navigate it. And so what we're trying to do is make these documents accessible so that they can be used with a screen reader. Some of the things that you need to make sure is that the semantic structure is there. I showed you the headers, so we have the sections in that document. And you get those headers by using the Styles tab in Word, and I can show that to you. You would use true lists and true tables. So some people use tables as a layout, right, to make it look pretty in their syllabus, let's say. But if it's not about data, then probably not use the table. You can use columns instead in Word instead of using a table. And I can try to show that to you, but that's a little bit more complicated than probably can get into today. But instead of using a table for just purely for layout purposes, you can use other features within it. You want to make sure that if you have an image in your document, that there's alt text for any images that you have. And that alt text is just basically a concise and precise way to describe what's important in that picture. You want to make sure that there's a title for your document. We save our files and we give it a file name. And we might give it like some acronym, and it might be a very long file name, and it means something to us, but maybe not to the person with a screen reader. The person with a screen reader needs to know what the title is. And in Word, PowerPoint, there's a place when you click on File, Info, there's a place to put title. And when you put the title, then it's and you put something meaningful about what this document is, that is what is read to the person with a screen reader. Now, if you don't do that, then the file name will be read to them and it could be cryptic to them. So by giving it a title, it's more meaningful. You want to make sure that there's good color contrast, that there's a lot of contrast between the different colors, and make sure that people with low vision can see. And finally, you want to make sure that there's descriptive hyperlinks. And that is what it looks like with the Google and also the color contrast analyzer. That is the example of a descriptive hyperlink. You don't want to use just the URL, because what happens is a screen reader reads the words it sees. And if a URL has just like random letters in it, it's trying to read it as a word, and it would be really confusing. And it could be very long. As you know, many URLs can be very long and they can get too much information. So by using a descriptive hyperlink, you're making it more accessible. So I'm going to demonstrate some of this for you. I think that'll be the best way to go about it. I'm going to stop sharing this screen, so then I can show you how to do all of this. So in Word, I'm going to click on this one. This is that document that I showed all of you before. And I'm going to take out this word. Oh, actually, I'm just going to leave it the way it is. But basically, I have this document in Word and I've used what we call headers. And this is what the structure is really important. Without the headers, they can't navigate the document. And I'm going to change, let me just change this font real quick because I was playing with this earlier. So let me just change this one here. Okay. And we're just going to make that one bigger. All right. So basically, I have this header and I can collapse the entire document in this header. You'll see I can just click it and collapse it. If I click on View in Word, I click on Navigation pane, I can see it's like a table of contents. And I can see that I have all these sections in this table, in this document. And with a screen reader, these are called headers. And the person can jump around between the headers by using the screen reader application and their keyboard or their mouse to be able to get through that. So essentially, what you're doing is you're going to start with the header 1, and that's the title of your document. So what you would do is you would highlight that first part, and let me see if I can get over here. My screen is a little tiny, but I'm going to click on the home, and you'll see over here under styles. This is where you want to use the headers. So you got a header 1 for the title. And if I go down to another section down here, I have introduction, is a header 2. It's hard to see, but that is highlighted in this little box here. And by setting it as a header 2, it shows the person that this is a subsection of this document. And as you can see, I've got a header 2 here highlighted, a header 2, and then underneath that, this is a header 3. I'm going to click down. You can see there's a header 3 here. So how does that get in there? What I recommend is that you put your content together, whether it's a syllabus or whatever it is you're working on, you put it together.
And once you have it, then you go back and you identify your headings. So if this is going to be a header 1, what you can do is you can just highlight it and then click heading 1 and it will change it. If you want to keep the font the way it is, you can right mouse click, update heading to match selection. So you can do it that way if you want, or you can click right mouse click and go to modify. And then you can modify the header. So I'm going to just keep it at 16. I'm going to click OK. But here you can change the font, the size, the color. And if it's something that you're going to do a lot, what you can do is you can change this to new documents based on this template. That way you don't have to keep redoing it over and over again. If this is the same header that you want for all of your documents throughout your course, then you can have it new documents based on this template. And I click OK. And so if I did this, I'm just going to show you an example here. I'm going to collapse everything. Let's say I had this and I want to make this, I'm going to change this font to something different. I'm just going to use Algerian for now because it's very different. Let's say that's the font I want, although it's not very accessible, just so you know. You want to have something that doesn't have any serif, you know, the curls at the end. Normally you would use Calibri or Arial or something like that. But if I wanted to use this as the font for my heading 2, I can highlight it, right mouse click heading 2 and update heading 2 to match selection. And when I do that, you'll see it changed it for all of my heading 2s. So once you can, it's nice that you can do it just once and it changes it for all of them. The other thing I can do is if I right mouse click it and click on the modify, I can change it here as well. So if I want to go to the Algerian, I can click it and then it changes it for all of them. So the headings are really important because the screen reader uses them for the person to be able to navigate the document. They listen to the header 1 and they can skip to the header 2 and skip through all the different headers to find out where they want to go, and then they can get there. So that's one of the first things you want to make sure you have with your document is that it's got the right structure. The next thing that I talked about was you want to make sure you have alt text for any images. So at the end of this document, I have an image. With Word, the version that I have, if I right mouse click, there is a view alt text. You'll notice that with Word, whenever you insert a picture, it's going to always try to give it the alt text for you. It'll generate it for you. And you can turn that off if you want, because if you want to be able to describe your pictures, you can turn that off by clicking on the Review tab, check accessibility under Options. You can turn off automatically generate alt text for me. If you turn that off, then Word will not try to generate the alt text, and you can type it in yourself. But essentially what you can do is you would right mouse click it, go to alt text, and you would talk about what's important in this picture. So if I was teaching a course on, let's say, parks in major cities, I would say aerial view of New York City. I'm spelling it wrong, but that's okay. And of Central Park, right? That's what I might type if I were teaching a class on parks in cities. But if I'm teaching a course on architecture, I might list the types of buildings that I can see. So you as the content expert will know what's important about this picture that needs to be conveyed to the student. So you would pick what's important and you wouldn't describe absolutely everything that you see in it. I'm just going to leave New York City. The other thing you can do is if it was just decorative purposes, you just want it to be because it's pretty or add some dimension to your course, but there's not conveying any information, you can mark it as decorative. And the screen reader will just ignore it. It won't even know that it's there. So you have a choice of either giving it some alt text, which should be clear, precise, and you want to mark it, or you can mark it as decorative. So that was another thing. You want the styles, you want the headers, and you want to make sure there's alt text. Another thing I mentioned was the color contrast. You want to make sure there's enough color contrast in your document. So I'm going to change this font and show you what I mean. We're going to change this to a yellow. And you probably already can tell that this is not a great view, but you can use this color contrast analyzer that it's in the PowerPoint, and I'm going to share the PowerPoint with the team so they can send that out to you all if you like. This color contrast analyzer is an application that's free, and you can use this to check to make sure that there's enough color contrast in your document. And the way you would do it is you can click on it says foreground color. You can pick on the eyedropper And you would pick that foreground color. In this case, it's yellow. And then in the background color is white. And you can see that it failed the test of being enough color contrast. The yellow on white is not a good color contrast. So I would want to pick a different color so that there was much more contrast. So I'm going to undo what I did. And now I'm going to do the eyedropper again. As you can imagine, black on white is the most contrast. So you can see that it passed the test, and you make sure there's enough color contrast. So we talked about the structure of the document, alt text for images, and that there's enough color contrast. The other thing I talked about was hyperlinks. You want to make sure that they're meaningful. So if I wanted to put a hyperlink on a word or words, I would highlight them, right mouse click it, and click on link. And then you can add a link manually, or you can create a link to, you could copy paste a link. So you can just click insert link, and then you can type out, close this out. You would type out the address, whatever that might be. And now I have the descriptive hyperlink. So again, when it comes to the hyperlink, you want to make sure that it's not just the hyperlink that the person is going to or reading. You want them to know that this is a link to the National Federation, and that they can click it if they want, but they're not getting the entire URL read to them, because otherwise that would be a lot of information. I'm just going to go back and make sure I covered everything. Okay, the last thing I'm going to show you is the title. I talked a little bit about that. Remember, the file name is important. You're going to have the file name, but the title is important for someone with a screen reader. When you click on file, there's info, and here you can see there's a title. It says right here, add a title. So I would call this creating non-visual aid, and then you would put whatever title you want to put in there. So this is very important that this is included, so that people with a screen reader will get the title of the document, not the file name. That makes a big difference for accessibility. Those are the main things with a Word document. And what I can show you real quick is a syllabus that I put together for my class. This is the version I have now of my syllabus. As you can see, I included a table of contents so that people can, most syllabus or syllabi, it takes a while for people to get through them because they tend to be a lot of pages. Mine is 8 pages. It's for a 1-credit class. It's not a very big class, but this is a small class. But I find that having this table of contents makes it easier for students to navigate the syllabus, and they can get to whatever they need right away. Most people are going to go right to the grading scale. They want to know how do I get an A in the class. This is an example of what an accessible syllabus could look like. You can have, what I'm doing here is I'm using columns. So I have all this information in one column, then I have my table of contents in another column. And then by saving this as a PDF, they're able to just click on it. So if I click on updated, I have my PDF version of this. The student can then click on whatever they want to see more about, grading scale. They can see what do they need to get an A. So by creating this accessible syllabus, the students were able to navigate easily. And I want to show you quickly a website. It's developed by Kirsten Kaling. She's the one that wrote Reach Everyone, Teach Everyone with Thomas Tobin. She works at Tufts. And if you go to accessible syllabus.com, this walks you through what creating an accessible syllabus could look like. And I use some of their tips to do that. So you can see there's 4 things that they have you look at. The first is the image. And what that is having images in and see the table of contents. That's exactly what I did. And so what this did is they took this syllabus from this all text syllabus, and they created this type of syllabus. It's up to you if you want to do that. I will say it did take a lot of work. For me to create this table of contents, it was not an easy task, but I was able to figure it out. But this is a resource you can use. It's called accessiblesyllabus.com, and it walks you through some things you can do to make it more accessible. I just realized, oh, okay, Bertha, I just realized you just mentioned it would be good to have the PowerPoint. Yes, I will be sharing that with you all. One of the other things that they talk about in this is under the text, under accessible syllabus, you want to have, you want to be concise with what you're saying. The interactive hyperlinks, remember I've talked about that. That's what they call them, interactive hyperlinks. And you want it to read friendly. So for instance, they had, this is the content and this is what it looked like after they did that. I will say that this does help people with dyslexia. By having less words per line, it helps people with dyslexia to be able to get the content. And by having space between the sentences also helps with dyslexia. So making it a little clearer, it's better to have it not for just people who with the screen reader too, but also people who are reading it who might have some cognitive disabilities. And just by looking from the left side to the right side, it is easier for me to read that as well. It's got the list and the bullets and that sort of thing. So it does help. So I wanted you to know about this website because I think it helps for you to think about how do you want to present your syllabus. The rest of it is, I think, more about the language you use in your syllabus and how you want to, instead of saying that here's some examples, come prepared in the class, rather than saying that, you say, I hope you actively participate. So this just gives you some language that you could use to help you make a more inclusive and welcoming class. And finally, under policy, and this might be something that you all have anyway, depending on your university, but they might have a Center for Students with Disabilities, and they would probably already have their policy written, and you might just include that in your document. So this is a helpful website. I'll include that in the syllabus as well. I mean, in the PowerPoint as well, so you can access it. I had an instructor I was working with the other day looking at her syllabus. And one of the things she did, which was great, was she included a picture of herself. I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute. She included a picture of herself on it and introduced herself in the syllabus, but she put it at the end of the syllabus. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have that at the beginning of the syllabus so you can welcome them to the class? So she changed the format of it. So her picture was at the beginning. So with her little welcome message about who she was and to make it a more welcoming experience. And so that's why I always say start with the syllabus, because that's the one document that all students access first in your class. And by having that interaction with them that's already welcoming, you are creating an opportunity for them to be more welcomed in your class and more inclusive. So I could keep going. Is there anything else people want to know about or you want to see something?
Yes, Karen, I just was wondering.
Bertha, did you have a question?
Yes, is this syllabus on the learning place, posted on the learning? Are you creating it on the learning management system?
Actually, hold on. I just
Because of
realized
the
that
online.
could you repeat that? I just realized my speaker was off. Go ahead.
Is this syllabus created on the learning management system like Blackboard or Canvas or whatever system the university is using?
It can be. Yep.
Or can I do it for myself, on my own computer? I'm just curious.
The one that they had on the page, the accessible syllabus, was one they created themselves and they saved it on their computer, but then they uploaded it to the LMS. So,
okay. So I can do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to know because I've only done it on the learning management. I've done something similar on the learning management system, but I see, I'm glad that you walked us through this advice because that's a much better way of presenting.
Yeah, so we can do that in Blackboard. We have Blackboard here at UConn and we can do that. And the good thing is that it creates, it's accessible because it's using HTML.
Okay.
So that way somebody with a screen reader can access it pretty easily. But it is limited to only being able to access it on the web, right? You have to be on the internet to get it. So with the document, somebody could print it out if they choose to do that.
Okay.
And it's formatted in a nice format. So,
okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions? Oh, I did not show you the tables. I probably should show you tables. If you want to stick around, let me just show you tables real quick. So one of the things, as I mentioned before, is that people use tables to help, let's just open, let me just find one. Here we go. Use tables to help lay out things. So you might put I'm going to change this up though. I'm going to put Karen as I'm the instructor and this is my number. And then I have my TA that's working with me, right? And so I might do it like this. So let me just put it the way that it was, 486. And then I have Sally here, right? And so Sally might be my TA. So I might lay it out like this. And let me just delete this row. And just to make it visually easy for me to see it, the problem is that, actually, I'm going to change it up, is that if you put, if you do it this way, there we go. What happens is a screen reader reads tables from left to right and down. So in this case, it would read Karen and Sally, and then my number and her number. And that could be really confusing to somebody that's got a screen reader. What you want to do is if you use a table, you want to make sure that its data that's in one column is all the same data. Here we've got a mix. We've got a name and a number. What you want to do is you want to make sure that it's the same information in one column. And it makes it a lot easier for a screen reader. So then I would do what I just had before, which is I had Sally here. And let's just leave with that number with her. But now what I don't have also is I don't have headers. So the person with a screen reader won't know what is this information I'm seeing. So you want to make sure that there is a header. And so I'm just going to put name and then phone. And so now I've got the data in each column and I have a header. And one of the other things with the table is when you set it up under table design, you want to make sure that header row is checked off. And the other thing is under layout is you want to make sure that this option here, let's see, repeat header rows is turned on. So this repeat header rows, it doesn't look like it does anything. So right now it's off and I'm going to click it back on again. And it looks like it doesn't do anything, but what it does is if this table were to span more than one page, the header rows would be repeated on the second page. It doesn't look like it's necessary for this because it's so short and the table is small, but with the screen reader, I don't know the tech, why this is important, but with the screen reader, it's important that you click that feature on that repeat header rows. That way it's more accessible to people with a screen reader. So with the table, again, you want to make sure that each column has unique data in that. In first one is name, the second one is phone, and that you have a header row and that you repeat header rows. So I meant to mention that earlier with the table. So is there anything else anyone wants to know about or learn about, or is this enough now and you have something to work with? You're going to go make some accessible content. All right. Well, it was lovely having you all, and I appreciate you all doing this because you're taking the extra effort to be inclusive in your classroom. So I think that's wonderful for you to be able to do that for your students. And I think in the end, you'll be a better teacher because you are going to be thinking about all ways you can teach people. So you're welcome, Bertha. Thank you for your time.
And I just wanted to thank you for your time as well. You know, we really appreciate you being here and giving us such, good advice and wonderful content. So thank you again, Karen.
You're welcome. And have a great day, everybody.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.